Okay, this video is all about simplifying radicals. So this is just a reminder of how to simplify radicals and what to do when you see a radical, either a square root or a cube root. So remember that you have to know these radicals. So the square root of 4 all the way up to the square root of 400. So you need to know those. And then just a reminder that the square root of x squared is always x. So if I have a variable, I want to break it into x squareds because I know the square root of that. Alright, so remember to simplify, we're breaking it into the square root or cube root of a number that you know. So for 450, I'm looking at my list. Do I know the square root of 450? No. But what do I know the square root of that can help me? So I'm going to break 450 into 225 times 2. I know the square root of 225, it's right there. And then x cubed I want to break into the square root of x squared times the square root of x. So now I'm thinking, what of this do I know? I know the square root of 225, that's just 15. Don't know the square root of 2. I know the square root of x squared, that's just x. Don't know the square root of x. So it becomes 15x square root of 2x. And that's it. Let's try another one. Square root of 180. So I'm looking at my list. Do I know the square root of 180? Nope. So what can I break 180 into? I could do 9 times 20, but that's not the largest. What would be the largest that I can break 180 into? Should be 36. So I've got the square root of 36 times the square root of 5. I know the square root of y squared, so I'm leaving that alone. And I'm going to break z to the 4th into z squared times z squared. Square root of 36 becomes 6. I don't know the square root of 5. The square root of y squared becomes just y. Z, z. So that's 6y z squared, because there's two z's. Z times z is z squared. Square root of 5. And I'm done. Okay, so now I've got negative 3 times the square root of 72. So what am I going to break 72 into? 36 again. The negative 3 is out in front. I'm not doing anything to that yet. 36 times the square root of 2 times the square root of a squared times the square root of a times the square root of b squared times b squared times b. Because I have 5 b's. It's b to the 5th power, so I need a b squared, and a b. So now I have negative 3 times 6 times the square root of 2 times a times the square root of a times b times b times the square root of b. Simplify by putting everything outside the radical outside. So negative 18 a b squared times the square root of 2ab. All done. Here's another one. Do I know the square root of 256? Well, let's go back and look. Do I know the square root of 256? Yep, it's right there. So the square root of 256 is just 16. So I don't need to break that into anything. I know the square root of it. Or at least you should know the square root of it. Oops. H squared, h. So it becomes 4 times 16 times g times g times h times h times h times the square root of h. So altogether that's 64 g squared h cubed square root of h. Done. Remember, for the cube roots, these are the ones that you need to know. So the cube root of 8 through the cube root of 1000. And then remember that the cube root of x cubed is just x. So using this list, we're going to look at these cube roots. Remember, the difference is this little 3 right here. So you've got to pay attention. If there's that 3, this is the list you're using. If there isn't a 3 there, it's the square root that you're using. So the cube root of 48. 48's not on my list, so I'm breaking into something I do know the cube root of, which would be 8 in this case. Cube root of 8 times the cube root of 6. This time, instead of x squared, I want it to be x cubed, because I know x cubed. So I make it x cubed, which leaves the cube root of just x, times the cube root of y cubed. So the cube root of 8 is 2. Don't know the cube root of 6. X. I don't know the cube root of just x, times y. So 2xy cube root of 6x. If this 3 isn't there, you've got the wrong answer. That's something totally different. The square root of 6 is different than the cube root of 6. Those are two different things. So this is my final answer. Let's try another one. Cube root of 375. So is 375 on my list? No. But what can I break 375 into that is on my list? Hopefully you picked 125. So I'm going to make this the cube root of 125 times the cube root of 3, because 125 times 3 is 375, times the cube root of a cubed times the cube root of a cubed times the cube root of b squared. I'm not going to be able to do the cube root of b squared because 2b's isn't enough. I have to have 3. So that's going to stay the same. So I've got the cube root of 125, that's 5. Cube root of 3 times a times the cube root of b squared. Not enough to take the cube root of it, so it just stays. So I've got 5a squared cube root of 3b squared. And that's my final answer. Okay, let's try this one. The cube root of 512. So look at my list. Do I know the cube root of 512? Yep, there it is. So I don't need to break that into anything. So that's the cube root of 512 times the cube root of x cubed times the cube root of x cubed times the cube root of how many x's are left? Just 1, because there's 3 here, 3 here, so that's 6, so I need 1 more to make 7. So then I'm looking at the y's. It's the cube root of y cubed times the cube root of y. And then I've got z cubed, so the cube root of z cubed. Cube root of 512 from our list was 8. So this is 8 times x times the cube root of x times y times the cube root of y times z. So that's 8x squared y z times the cube root of xy. Remember that 3 has to be there, has to be part of the cube root. So there's my final answer. Alright, so let's try this one. Negative 6 times, do I know the cube root of 192? So look back at your list. Is 192 on here? No. So I need to break 192 into something. So I'm thinking, can I take 192 divided by one of these numbers? So what do you get? Hopefully you got 64. So I'm taking the cube root of 64 times the cube root of 3, because 64 times 3 is 192, and then times the cube root of a cubed times the cube root of b. So I've got negative 6 times 4 times the cube root of 3 times a times the cube root of b. Negative 24a cube root of 3b. Done. Alright, last but not least. 4 times the cube root of 24. I don't know the cube root of 24, so I break it into something I do know. So what am I going to take 24? 8's my only option, right? So I've got cube root of 24 becomes the cube root of 8 times the cube root of 3 times the cube root of x cubed times the cube root of x times the cube root of y cubed times the cube root of y cubed times the cube root of y cubed, because there's 9 y's. So that's 3, 6, 9 y's. Okay, so this becomes 4 times 2 times the cube root of 3 times x times the cube root of x times y times y times y. So 8x y cubed, cube root of 3x. Final answer, and I'm done.